Freelance was once again leaving the Keweenaw Canal. We had said our goodbyes to Holden Hancock 2 hours earlier, after of course first having our morning coffee and some awesome rolls at Roy's Pasties and Bakery on its waterfront, and we were now bound for Windigo on Isle Royale. Our plan had actually been to go to Copper Harbor at the top of the huge Keweenaw Peninsula, but at the last minute we changed our minds. The weather window seemed ideal for crossing over to Windigo now. The sea state was 1 to 3 feet, and we had a slight southwesterly breeze at 8 knots. There's about 50 nautical miles from the upper entry to Washington Harbor. It would be a full day's run, but we should at least be able to arrive at Windigo late in the afternoon, and definitely well before sunset. Isle Royale is not an easy place to enter in the dark. There are very few aids to navigation, and the rocks are unforgiving, so that option is best avoided. One time I did come in here late at night seeking shelter from a gale, but that was a very risky thing to do. Anyway, the winds picked up and we were sailing again. When you're far from shore, out there on the wide open lake, it's easy to think you're alone, but it's really deceiving. There's usually some other traffic moving about someplace, including a few of the big freighters. They run in the established shipping lanes, which are well marked on the charts, but there is, of course, other boat traffic out there as well to watch out for. The big freighters make quite a target on the radar. Recreational boats less so. Modern electronics such as radar and AIS are often able to alert you in advance to the traffic, even when there's nothing yet to see on the horizon or in fog. Of course, you need to keep a proper lookout regardless of the visibility. You're usually a bit chilly when you're out there on the deep waters of the northern part of Lake Superior, and this day was not any different. So we were quite happy to have lee claws up, giving us some shelter in the cockpit. The heights of Isle Royale were now clearly visible over the horizon, but we still had a ways to go to Washington Harbor and on to Windigo. Our waypoint was set off Cumberland Point, and moving at about 7 knots, we were making excellent progress towards our destination. Freelance had a comfortable lean and an easy motion. All was going well, and we figured we would arrive at our destination much earlier than I had calculated. Without a doubt, we had chosen an absolutely perfect day to make another crossing of Lake Superior. Isle Royale is a 45-mile-long, rocky and partially submerged ridge that is oriented from the southwest to the northeast and located just a few miles off the Canadian North Shore. It's said it's in the U.S. waters because Benjamin Franklin wanted it that way. Its deep fjords and boreal forests are absolutely awesome to visit, but the island can be very tricky to enter between its rocky reefs. They come up from the deep with little warning, so you'll need to know where you can safely pass through without getting prop dings and fiberglass scrapes. Bonnie Dahl's superb cruising guide, The Superior Way, is unfortunately out of print, so in my opinion, the detailed cruising guides from the Great Lakes Cruising Club are currently the best source for sailing directions. Both the GLCC's reports and the Superior Way are based on local knowledge from cruisers who have been there. I should mention that Vicky and I are longtime members of the Great Lakes Cruising Club, and we really value its cruising information. We chose to enter Isle Royale through Grace Harbor. As some of you know, we have gone through its main passage countless times. The first couple of times we used it, it was well marked. But the buoys have regrettably been removed, so you have to be careful in its narrow channel and pass through at low speed, and this channel is definitely not one to attempt after dark. The channel's final turn into Washington Harbor is around the southwestern tip of Booth Island, where you still need to watch out for the rocks. Vicky could now come back to the cockpit from her lookout duty at the bow. From here, the fjord leads about 4 miles further inland to Windigo, which is at the end of the inlet. Washington Harbor is a place that always has had a lot of activity. Some of the area's historic cabins still remain, but the old-time copper mine structures, fishing camps, clubs, and lodges are long gone. Today, Windigo is one of 2 busy entry points into the national park. Here's a daily ferry and airplane services that bring scores of eager hikers and visitors from the mainland. And there's usually some recreational boats that are coming in to file their float plans and pay the park's entrance fees. However, we did not need to check in with the rangers this time because we had already been taking care of the formalities at the National Park Service office at Houghton. Windigo has a lot more to offer than just being an entry point for the national park. We were very happy to be back here and to have dock space on the protected east side of the main pier, but we temporarily had to leave the dock to accommodate the ferries that were coming in. The familiar 65-foot Voyager 2, which is operating out of Grand Portage in Minnesota, was arriving at the exact same time as a 160-foot package ship, the Ranger 3 out of Houghton, Hancock. The Ranger can carry about 125 passengers and about 100 tons of cargo. It used to run exclusively from Houghton, Hancock to Rock Harbor, which is the entry point at the northeastern end of Isle Royale. But for the last couple of years, it has also brought passengers and cargo to Windigo. It's always a treat to see the big ship. We did, of course, stay well away from the dock while the two ferries came in. The Ranger was scheduled to be at Windigo all night, but we knew the Voyager would only be there for a short while. It was continuing on its way to Rock Harbor, where it usually stays overnight. Its route takes it all around Isle Royale every 2 days, and if it's arranged ahead of time, does pickups and drop-offs of hikers and campers at Malone Bay, Chippewa Harbor, Daisy Farm, and Macago Cove before returning to Grand Portage on Minnesota's North Shore. We made several wide circles in the windy bay while patiently waiting for the Voyager to leave Windigo. It really didn't take all that long. Soon it was time for us to reclaim our shelter dock space. And when we were back at the pier, we had an up-close view of the activities associated with a big boat. It reminded me a bit of my childhood experiences, watching the old-style freighters and ferries loading and unloading at the busy piers in Aarhus Havn back in Denmark. The Ranger quietly cast off its lines and left the dock early in the morning, and a bunch of the park personnel waved their friends on the big ship a fond farewell from the end of the pier before they returned to the various chores. The Voyager came in about an hour later, bringing a new batch of visitors to Windigo who tongue-in-cheek were repeatedly urged to loudly ask how wild Isle Royale is. Vicky and I walked up the hill to the ranger station. It's no longer new, but it's a far cry from the old rickety check-in shed which used to be down by the pier. I really like this building. It has a pleasant interior with history and nature books, maps, charts, park clothing, and other items for sale, as well as the old Fresnel lens from the Rock of Ages light, a moose skeleton and a stuffed wolf, and a model of the wrecked SS America. Outside, an electronic display shows the ferry arrivals and departures, as well as the float plane flight schedules. The small plane service has become increasingly popular in recent years, and during COVID was the only way to get here unless you came by private boat. Some may say that the plane noise is intrusive in a national park, but I find it very minor, and if anything, the planes add to the island's exotic feel. The timber-framed shelter by the pier is popular with hikers and boaters, and is also used for various lectures and presentations by the rangers. But we don't go there that often. Instead, Vicky and I usually hang out at the pier, enjoying the beautiful scenery. And there's usually always something going on, especially when the ferries are coming in. The old Windigo store up the hill is now closed, replaced with a beautiful new building, which is in a much better location than the old store, closer to the bathrooms, fuel dock, and piers. When you walk into the new store, you quickly realize it has far more floor space than the old one. It may actually seem a little empty, sort of unfinished, but it will probably fill up with time. The food service is very limited. When we were there, they were only serving pizza, probably because the store was incredibly short-staffed. The store is well stocked with all kinds of food items, most of them best suited for hiking adventures in the park, meaning of both the freeze-dried and canned variety. There are other camping essentials, fishing gear, clothes, souvenirs, snacks, condiments, and ice cream, and an abundance of wine, beer, and soft drinks. The large deck with good seating and a grand view is definitely a huge improvement. If you can get your boat close enough to it, there's both diesel and gas available at the small nearby fuel dock. Unfortunately, the pump out wasn't working. We walked some of the easier local trails, mainly east, down towards a campground where the creek runs into Washington Harbor. By the way, this is an area where we have often seen moose, but we didn't see a single one this time. The number of moose at Isle Royale has dropped from nearly 2,500 to less than 800 after a serious winter tick infestation and the reintroduction of wolves. The thimbleberries weren't ripe yet, but we knew it was still early. I really don't want to give you the wrong impression, so I should tell you that the hiking trails at Isle Royale are nothing like the groomed paths that you see here. Instead, the trails that run all over the 45-mile-long island are best described as rugged, and if you intend to do some serious hiking here, you will do well to wear well broken-in hiking boots. The campsites at Windigo are very nice, and some of them have primitive shelters that somewhat resemble an old-fashioned lean-to. These three-sided structures, which have screens on the four sides, are in high demand by the hikers, especially when it's raining. We seldom see any of them that aren't occupied. Of course, when it's raining, the campers at Windigo can also escape the rain at the ranger office, the store, and the large shelter by the pier. During this particular stay at Isle Royale, we have been quite lucky with the weather. When it's sunny, the park is a mild and pleasant place for us to enjoy a leisurely summer day. But when the weather turns rainy and blustery, as it was forecast, you quickly realize that you are now visiting a cold and clammy boreal forest high up north on Lake Superior and right next to the Canadian border. The cold and rainy weather is, of course, something Vicky and I are well prepared for. Cruising on Lake Superior means you have to be ready for anything weather-wise. We have plenty of technical clothing along, and we also have the means to thoroughly warm up Freelance's cabin. It might be miserable outside on a day like this, but we can be quite cozy inside. It's a time to just relax, read books, and of course have another hyggelig, as we say in Denmark, communal dinner with boating friends. The rain was supposed to pass by morning. The weather forecast then promised a nice 2-day weather window for making our way back to the Apostle Islands. But if we stayed, the weather would slam shut for a full 5 days. There are worse places to be weathered in than at Isle Royale, but it really was time for us to get back. Our plan was to leave at sunrise for Grand Marais, Minnesota, and on the following day cross Lake Superior to the Apostles on the South Shore.
Join us for the next video. We'll be sailing again along the Sawtooth Mountains of Lake Superior and back to the Apostle Islands. Please don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and also leave a comment, which is valuable to us.